All right, the gang's back together. Lindsay, Jimmy, and John Wertheim now joining the show. And we start with a lot of news today. One of the stories, we saw a proposed schedule from the WTA tweeted out by a couple of players yesterday, including Tara Moore. It showed that the tour would be coming back August 3rd in Charleston, which, by the way, there's the event in Charleston happening just next week, Lindsay. So take a look at this, and what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this was never supposed to be leaked, and this was really a wish list of the WTA. This is not by any means set in stone. In fact, the event in Charleston is in a couple of weeks. It's not going to count towards the WTA. They don't think they can turn around and put a tournament on a few weeks later. That schedule also had Cincinnati in Cincinnati. It had U.S. Open qualies, all of which the USTA said was not going to happen. So it's a little bit of It was a little bit of misinformation. That should have never been leaked. And again, that was more of a wish list by the WTA than a schedule that is really going to happen.
I heard exactly the same thing. I had a text, and I didn't even realize what it referred to, basically saying a calendar is going to be out there on social media. Please don't retweet it. It's just exactly what Lindsay said. This was sort of a best case scenario. Apparently, it hasn't been outdated. I mean, I do think what you're seeing is that there is a real, I don't want to say desperation, but there is such an urgency by players to get back out there. Tara Moore, the player Lindsay referenced, she's, outside the top 200 and clearly wants to get back to playing tennis, but there is still a lot of juggling. There's an ATP Tour call that I understand is still going on now that started more than 3 hours ago. So clearly it is a fluid situation, and I would not take that list of tournaments as gospel, far from it.
Such difficult times, really, that we're going through, because not just the tournaments trying to figure out if they can play, when they can play, all that, but also the rankings. What are we going to do with the rankings? I mean, that's how players make their living. They stay ranked high enough to get in the tournaments. Players' points have been dropping off or haven't been. It is so up in the air right now, and it's kind of amazing to me that the tennis bodies, ATP and WTA, sort of haven't at least figured out how they're going to address the ranking situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, certainly a lot of questions across the board. John, we learned earlier today Roger Federer will be missing the rest of the season. We also learned that Novak Djokovic says likely he won't continue his season in 2020 until the clay court season. That would mean that he would miss the U.S. Open. And American Danielle Collins put this on her Instagram story. She was not happy with Novak Djokovic. Did you see what Collins had to say, and what did you think about it?
Yeah, Danielle Collins essentially said that Novak really distinguished himself with the relief fund for players, but this was inconsistent with that, and that he was doing a disservice to the sport. I don't really understand this. I mean, I don't understand what players can make their own decisions. That if Novak Djokovic doesn't want to play, if he's not comfortable with the small membrane, with paring down his team, or with bringing his family across an ocean, or staying in a hotel, whatever his reason, it's another spot in the draw for somebody else. I mean, somebody else is going to get $50,000 who's ranked outside the top 100. So I heard this also, with respect. Donna Vekic apparently didn't want to play, and that didn't go over so well. I feel like these players are their own corporations. They're all autonomous. And if Novak Djokovic doesn't want to play, that'll open a draw spot for someone else. But yeah, Danielle Collins was not pleased and let herself be heard.
Yeah, and some of the players are afraid the tournaments are not going to happen without the guarantees of the top players playing. That's not how this sport should run. A Grand Slam should either go or it doesn't go. It shouldn't matter on what players are saying 2 to 3 months ahead of time. And John's exactly right. Players don't feel safe traveling. If players don't want to cross borders right now, if players don't feel comfortable in a situation, you can't make them play. Does that affect the lower ranked players? In reality, it shouldn't. The U.S. Open should go on as they're planning, if they think they can make it work, not if they think they cannot, if they get the top players or not.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing, Lindsay, is whether or not, if they get the top players, we know they'll try to have the tournament. If they don't, I still want them to have the tournament. And I actually, sounding as though so many players aren't possibly going to play, I think I'm going to enter and see if, I can grab that 50,000 possibly for the first round. Get a protected ranking from 1983.
It's an interesting conversation. And John, I know you're very versed in terms of the financial aspects. If we're going to have a U.S. Open with no fans, and that seems likely, then it doesn't matter who's playing on the court, in my opinion, right? Because you wouldn't be getting revenue from spectators that would see Djokovic play Nadal as opposed to anyone against anyone. So even if the top players choose not to go, it wouldn't affect how you run this event, right?
Yeah, I mean, there is a television partner that will be providing more revenue than will cover prize money. And if you are, I mean, let's just, let's be blunt. If ESPN is going to be in this game, they would much rather Serena Williams and Novak Djokovic and Roger Federer were on the card than perhaps lesser known players. But I think Lindsay's right. Either have this event or you don't. But I don't think we need to be in the business of holding events based on who's RSVPing to the party, yes and no. And if we're going to have a U.S. Open, let's have it. And honestly, let's be frank. Maybe Grigor Dimitrov breaks through. I mean, maybe one of the big three doesn't show up. Maybe all three of the big three don't show up. So be it. Have the event or don't have it, but don't have it based on the guest list.
Yeah, great point. Let's party either way, everybody.